And good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here this morning. As you will recall, in the aftermath of a number of very public violent occurrences in our city, most notably a shooting occurrence at the Eaton Centre, which was followed by a very violent event on Danzig Street in July, a number of initiatives were undertaken. On July the 26th, I came before you all and announced the implementation of a summer safety initiative by the Toronto Police Service. As part of that initiative, we asked our officers to work compulsory overtime. We asked the officers who work midnights to work 6 extra hours on their evening shift. We asked the officers, 4 extra hours on their evening shift. We asked the officers on days to work 2 more hours. And what we achieved through that was we put the full-time equivalent of 329 additional police officers out in our street. We put them out in uniform. We put them out in investigative capacities. And our intention in the Summer Safety Initiative was to restore safety and a sense of safety in all of our neighborhoods, which were vulnerable to the impacts of violence that people were very fearful of. And so this morning, I would like to share with you the results of that project. It took place from July the 26th until September the 9th. And I'd like, first of all, to call upon Deputy Chief Sloly. Peter Sloly is the officer commander of our field units, our divisions across the city. And he will share with you some of the initiatives that were undertaken in his divisions by these additional officers deployed on the street. Peter.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, folks, for attending. While I may have control over the 17 divisions, this was a whole-of-service effort, and virtually every single unit contributed to the plan, the implementation, and the actual results, which the Chief will let you know about very shortly. But as a reminder, this plan was quite comprehensive. It included a staffing increase, which the Chief has alluded to, 329 additional officers available in our most victimized areas. It was very much an intelligence-led deployment, where we got good information from within our own sources and, most importantly, from community sources about where crime and victimization was taking place, and we put those extra resources in those places. We aligned our operations around the single goal of providing extra protection to our communities and reducing victimization. We conducted very, very intensive shooting investigations, and not just investigations where people were hit with bullets, where places or things were hit with bullets, because any one of those events causes great concern in our communities. We focused on offender management, event management, place-based management, places where crime and victimization happens to greater degrees than other parts of the city. Traffic interdictions and traffic management, because criminals use the highways and the subways to move between locations. And most importantly, we focused on community mobilization, crime prevention, youth engagement, working with our young people, working with our marginalized communities, working with our at-risk communities, working with our high-potential residents who were struggling to feel safe and to be successful. And our officers, all of them, encouraged, empowered those young people across the city. An output from this was, quite frankly, going back to old school policing. Many of our young officers, we've hired over 1,600 officers in the last 5 years. Many of them have never had a chance to walk the beat, to be a neighborhood officer consistently day in and day out, working with young people, working in at-risk communities, and producing crime prevention and community mobilization effects. And they had that chance over the past 6 weeks, and they enjoyed it, and they were successful at it, and the results that the Chief will reveal shortly will prove that. Thank you very much.
Good morning. As the officer in charge of our Specialized Operations Section, I do want to echo what Deputy Sloly has already said. This was a comprehensive collective effort on behalf of virtually every unit within the service, from parking enforcement, who contributed to assisting in locating 23 stolen vehicles, to our Guns and Gangs unit, who not only worked extremely hard in developing information and making sure that it was passed on to our frontline officers so they could effectively deploy where they needed to be. We also continued to target those offenders and those people who chose to remain engaged in gun and gang violence, and we had a number of successes with that as well. And a lot of that information was the result of concerned citizens sharing their information with our officers to ensure that those dangerous situations of gun and gang violence and those people who chose to engage in that were removed from the streets. In addition to that, Our service, when we arrested these people, the offenders who are in possession of guns, who are engaged in violent crime, we also made sure that we continue to offer support to those offenders, such as gang exit programs, drug rehabilitation, and other programs. And I am pleased to say that a number of those offenders we've arrested throughout the Summer Safety Initiative have chosen to take part in those programs. So as I said, it's a very comprehensive approach. Our gun and gangs people, yes, did target those folks who needed to be removed from the streets, along with the guns that needed to be removed from the streets, but we also provided support, and all to complement the efforts of our frontline officers. And you'll hear the results from Chief Blair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Peter. As we've indicated, the purpose of the Summer Safety Initiative was to reduce violence, to reduce crime, and to reduce fear in all of our communities right across the city. And I want to share with you the results of that effort. As you can see from the chart now being displayed, this tracks the number of shooting occurrences that took place each month throughout 2012 year to date. As you can see, there was a significant number of shooting occurrences in January, and then what we saw from the month of February on, a slow but steady increase in the number of shooting occurrences, culminating through the month of June with the Eaton Center shooting, and then in early July with the shooting that took place on Danzig Street. The red line, as indicated on this chart, is the implementation of the Summer Safety Initiative. And as a result of the deployment that was made, what we saw was a very significant, a dramatic decline in the number of shooting occurrences throughout the rest of the summer over a 7-week period of the Summer Safety Initiative. The month of August and early September is traditionally a very busy month for this type of violent criminal activity in our city. And it coincides with a number of very important community events, festivals, gatherings of large numbers of people. And it's absolutely critical that these events be safe and that people feel safe at these events. And so we deployed our officers to restore a sense of safety and to protect the people of our communities. I think the results have been significant. And as you can see, throughout the month of August, there were significantly fewer shooting occurrences. Perhaps the most relevant comparison I can make is based on a comparison between what took place this summer during the Summer Safety Initiative and what has been the 7-year average for exactly the same period in the City of Toronto since 2005. And for example, we have averaged a total of 6.4 shooting homicides in that period over the past several years. This year we saw a 68.7 reduction in the number of homicides. That is almost a total of 5 fewer homicides taking place in 2012 during that period than what the average was for our city. When we announced this initiative, we talked about saving lives. We talked about making an investment in community safety. Today we are presenting to you the return on that investment. And I think that we have demonstrated through this initiative that we can make a difference, that working together, uniform officers and the people who live in some of our most vulnerable neighborhoods, working in partnership to keep their community safe, we can achieve significant reductions in violence and perhaps most importantly, significant reductions in fear in our communities. I don't want to sort of bombard you with statistics, but some of them are quite relevant. We saw a 62.2% reduction in total homicides in our city during that period, the period of the Summer Safety Initiative, compared to similar periods over the past several years. We saw a 50% reduction in the number of shooting occurrences in our neighborhoods. Our neighborhoods have been safer as a result of the work that we have done. The number of people injured by gunfire was also reduced by over 50%. These are significant reductions in violence. In addition, the presence of uniformed police officers in all of our communities have had a fairly significant impact on crime generally across the city. And for example, we saw a 17.2% reduction in robbery. Sexual assaults were down 12.8% in the city. Break-and-enters down 27.5%. Even auto theft has been reduced a total of 53% during this period. And so we saw significant reductions in all of our crime categories in all of our neighborhoods right across the city. I think that the evidence before us today is irrefutable proof of the value of working in partnership with our communities. I also believe that we have demonstrated that when we send police officers out into some of our most vulnerable neighborhoods, and they work respectfully and in partnership with the people in those neighborhoods, we can make a difference. And I am encouraged by that, and I would hope that the people of this city will be encouraged by what can be achieved when we work together. I am sure that there are now questions about what's next, and so we'll talk about that, about a little bit what's next. But the evidence before us reaffirms for me my conviction that cops count, and that when we have sufficient resources to deploy into our neighborhoods, when they're out there doing the job that they need to do, but they're doing it in a way which is respectful and supported by the communities we are out there to serve and protect, together we make a significant difference. I'd now like to ask the Deputy to come forward again, Deputy Sloly, and talk about some of the things that are ongoing in our communities. You may also be aware, for example, that in 2 of our neighborhoods, we are doing the Neighborhood Tavis initiative that has been going on throughout the summer and has also been achieving truly remarkable results in 2 of our most vulnerable communities in the city, places that have experienced a totally unacceptable level of violence previously and where we have been able to achieve dramatic results. Those efforts are continuing. In addition, our efforts in Tavis deployments and all of our neighborhood officers will continue. We know the value, and our communities now know the value of the work that we are doing with them in all of these neighborhoods. We can make a difference. And so we are absolutely committed to continuing that effort. The safety of our city is something that we are proud of, but it's also something that we will never be complacent about. We always have to work hard at this, and we have learned, and as a lesson perhaps we already knew, that when we deploy our officers into these neighborhoods, we can make a difference. And I'd like the Deputy to come forward and speak about some of the next steps that we'll be undertaking.
Thank you, Chief. The Chief has a kind heart, but he's got a determined way of doing business. And while we're celebrating a little bit of a period of success, as the Chief said, we're not satisfied, and he wants to know what's next. And so I'll give you some insights into some of the ongoing projects and programs, some of the things that we're working on that will be implemented over the course of the remainder of the year. We will continue to have our Tavis rapid response teams, again, intelligence-led, heading into those neighborhoods and those areas where we've had high violent crime, which includes the entertainment district in the downtown core, some of our major gathering spots like shopping malls around the city. We have 2 neighborhood Tavis initiatives, one going on in 23 Division, which you would know as Northwest Etobicoke. As an example, the beginning of the year, 23 Division experienced the highest volume and the highest rate of increase in terms of firearm events in the city, unprecedented in its divisional history. Since we put that neighborhood Tavis initiative within that area where the officers are working in the NTI, what we call the NTI, there's only been 1 shooting incident. That started at the end of May. It will continue on till October 14th. Similarly, in 31 Division, we have another neighborhood Tavis initiative. They've had similar results with only 2 shooting incidents in the areas where the officers have been working in partnership with the local community. And I need to reinforce something the Chief has said over and over in his presentation. This is not just the work of officers in neighborhoods. It's the work of officers working with the people in those neighborhoods that are producing these results. That has to be recognized and repeatedly stated. We will probably expand those NTI programs to other divisional areas while maintaining some level of NTI support in the divisions that have them. The resourcing and the intelligence is being gathered right now by Jane Wilcox and her folks in intelligence. It will be intelligence-led. We'll put our scarce resources into the best places where they'll develop the best return on that investment. We'll continue with staffing redeployments. We're looking at every way we can to move officers out of the buildings and onto the streets. And we already have some ideas that are going to place a number of more officers into the streets. We're looking at aligning our shift schedule so we're more available to the communities when they need us and more available in the places when crimes happen in order to respond more quickly and to investigate more effectively. We're looking at new approaches. We've been looking overseas, across Canada and south of the border, at new and innovative ways to do policing. Some of it is purely police-driven, and a lot of it is new partnerships that we're creating. For instance, we have a project working up in 23 Division in Etobicoke that brings local community-based organizations, City of Toronto agencies, and the local police working with the local community on a wraparound service to protect at-risk kids at their time of greatest need. We're also continuing with our youth engagement programs. The Youth in Policing Initiative, which is traditionally a summer initiative, If you remember, the province announced its youth action plan. There's funding for an extension of the Youth and Policing Initiative into the school year, where they'll be working with our school resource officers in high schools across the city, providing employment opportunities for after-school programming in those schools. Again, that's support from the province and an expansion of our Youth and Policing Initiative. If I can only remind you, we've hired over 1,000 kids through that initiative over the past 6 years. All of them have gone on to do tremendous things in their communities and in their lives, and this is a continued investment in the youth. And the community, we're looking very closely at working partnerships with the Toronto Housing Commission. We've set up a number of high-level meetings between the Chief and the CEO, Jones, as well as working relationships and new plans for crime prevention through environmental design in the TCHC complexes across the city. And we've got a very specific program with our Somali community here in the city. They live across the city, but there are also pockets of high-density Somali populations within the city. Our local commanders are making very concrete efforts to outreach into those communities, to find new partners, to find new young people who've got influence within those neighborhoods and within those buildings, and we're starting to see some real progress there. That's just a sampling of some of the things that are ongoing and some of the things that will be coming up. As a reminder, every year the Toronto Police and its 17 divisions have over 200 youth and community engagement programs going on. We're going to continue that. We're going to build on that. We're going to strengthen that. This is not just about locking up bad guys, which we have done incredibly well and will continue to do, but it's about building up the good guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And just, I probably should touch on locking up the bad guys. It's kind of an important part of what we do in our business. The police are responsible for ensuring that people who engage in violent criminal acts in any of our communities are held to account. And the work of our uniform officers in all of our neighborhoods, the relative safety that has been achieved, I hope will have encouraged people to come forward and to overcome their fear in order to provide the police with information and evidence that we will need to hold people to account for the crimes that have been committed. You heard earlier in the week from my homicide squad about the progress of their investigation, and certainly we have identified over the course of that investigation the involvement of several individuals and rivalries that exist between emerging street gangs in the southeast part of our city. But that work is continuing not only in that neighborhood, but right across the city, and we will be unrelenting in our pursuit of the individuals responsible for this violence as we work in partnerships with our community to prevent any future occurrences. One thing, I think we've provided you with some stats and comparisons with the seven-year average of violent occurrences and crimes that have taken place compared to the period of the Summer Safety Initiative in 2012. There has been some references, and I think context is really important, and people have asked me on a number of occasions about how this compares to our experience in 2005. And as you'll recall, 2005 was a very violent summer for the city. There was a lot of very tragic events in that city, and that tragedy of violence resulted in a number of significant changes in the way in which we deploy our officers. It was the impetus for the development of the Toronto Anti-Violence Intervention Strategy, the formation of our Integrated Guns and Gangs Unit, and a myriad of programs and community outreach and partnerships with social services that I think have made a real difference. I just wanted to provide you with one more statistic, if I may. In 2005, during the period of July 26th to September the 9th, the same 7-week period as our Summer Safety Initiative. In 2005, 15 people lost their life to gun-related homicides. In 2012, the number was 2. And so that is an 86.7% difference. And I think that that's very significant difference represents the progress that we have been able to make and that our communities are able to make as a direct result of the work that we have done there, but also as a direct result of investments that have been made in those communities. Investments in social service programs, investments in young people. And I want to emphasize the importance not only of good policing in those neighborhoods, but the importance of the investments we make in the people that live there, and in particular the young people that live there, so that they can make the right choices and that they can be successful as citizens and help us keep our communities safe. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.